Hello everyone, welcome to this edition of Covenant for New England, and today we have two very unique guests, people who have been deeply involved in ministry in a regional way and who I believe have a lot of experience to share with us and insight regarding some of the issues that we've been exploring in the past few interviews, the issues of revival and renewal in the Church of Christ in New England, and unity and intercession, all these things that really we are very passionate about as a church in this region. And I have here on my left Dick Germaine, Reverend Dick Germaine, who has been involved in ministry for over 30 years as a pastor of First Congregational Church in Hopkinton, now Faith Community Church, and now working as a pastor of pastors in a way through Barnabas Ministries. We want to hear a little bit more about that in a moment. And Reverend Dana Baker from Grace Chapel, Director of Multicultural Ministries and Church Fellowship and Church Partnerships. And I know, Dana, you have been very involved also in work trying to bring churches from the suburbs and the city, and interested in issues of diversity and cooperation cross-denominational lines. We're going to be talking a little bit more about that. And so, you know, I'd just like to start perhaps with you. I know that your church, Grace Chapel, a very powerful institution and influential in so many wonderful ways in the New England region, has been deeply involved in a couple of efforts to foster unity. Could you tell us a little bit about that, and how do you see that enriching the community?
Well, I mean, I think there's been a number of things over the years. I mean, we've had a commitment to urban outreach for years and years and years. In fact, my predecessor on staff, Mary Ann Michener, actually built up our urban ministry program from the ground up when she started almost probably 30 years ago, and started in a very relational way, just going into the city, building relationships. And so she ended up being my mentor, and was the one that I worked, that I actually volunteered with as a lay volunteer before I got a call into ministry. And so she really kind of taught me that relational strategy. So we've had a strong urban regional outreach for years, for, as I say, almost 30 years or even longer. But recently, we've been trying to understand how we might partner in a more intentional way. And so we actually have a new kind of fledgling, I guess what I would call network that we're trying to develop. We actually have just given it a name. It's called Greater Things for Greater Boston. And what we're trying to do is really provide a really an organic development. We just really want to create a space where churches can come together, get to know one another, and then almost create a space where we can incubate ideas about how we might partner together to impact in a missional way the Boston area. So that's brand new.
Mm-hmm. Any challenges you found reaching across culture from the suburbs and a place like Grace, which is, you know, has a lot of people in corporate America and high-powered individuals now reaching into the inner city? Any challenges, difficulties you have encountered that might be illuminating for us?
Well, I mean, I think the good news is we've had 30 years to make a lot of mistakes, actually, and to actually, but then have a lot of successes, and to have, you know, I think actually one of the nice things about those 30 years of working was that a lot of it was not done in the public eye, so to speak. It was done behind the scenes, and it was done maybe not necessarily in such an upfront way. But as we gained confidence, and what ended up happening is one relationship led to another relationship, led to another relationship. And so in many ways, when I came on staff, I felt like I could you know, really start on Mary Ann's coattails. That, you know, oftentimes all I would need to say was, I've taken over Mary Ann's job and I could get in to see people. And so you just continue building those relationships. But what I found is, and I think again what Mary Ann modeled, was that going on people's turf, spending time in the city. Unfortunately, even when I was a lay volunteer, I actually fell in love with the city as an architect, which is what I did before I went into ministry. And so loving that, spending time, making the effort, not expecting people to come to the suburbs, but making the effort to go into the city, to spend time in the city, to spend time in people's churches, in their settings, go to their events, and not be, so once you develop that layer of trust, then all of a sudden it becomes much easier when you do feel like God's calling you to do something like this new partnership network. You've already got those relationships of trust that you can build on.
Yeah, and one of the interesting things that's happening in Grace Chapel is that Grace is becoming more and more of a multicultural, diverse community as well. Do you think that some of those efforts in getting intelligence, so to speak, in the inner city, with the diversity of the inner city, has helped you guys to become that diverse community? Have you been able to parlay some of those insights into being able to be more effective in ministry in your church?
Yeah, no, absolutely. In fact, when I look back on my own development and how God prepared me for what I'm doing right now, again, it was just being in the city and being in natural, organic, multicultural settings and relationships. I mean, that you can't, in some ways, learn that from a book, from a conference, or whatever. You learn it by being with people of diverse settings. And I think, so we partnered with Global Ministries Christian Church for a number of years. I mean, one of the really exciting things that happened at one point was, I don't know if you remember, way back, about probably 20, 25 years ago, when a number of churches burned in Tennessee, we actually took joint mission trips from Grace Chapel and Global Ministries Christian Church, African Americans and Euro Americans, who went down to Tennessee together and helped to work with those churches. And they said it was a huge testimony. So that's really what we've tried to do, is just create, I've gone down and marched down Washington Street in front of Bruce's church in solidarity, and when they've done different things with violence. We've prayed on the steps of the courthouse. So it's really just being in people's environment.
And that's very powerful. I know, Dick, that you have also, you've been involved over many, many years in an effort to work with ministers and churches of various denominations and so on. You were a local pastor for over 30 years in a very successful church that now God is doing extraordinary things there as well. Yeah. And now you've been working with Barnabas Ministries. Could you tell us a little bit about Barnabas Ministries and some insight that you have gained about unity and working with people of different denominations?
Yeah, the movement itself, if we're going to call it that now, began with an experience I had in the spring of 1992, and I received a letter. I won't go into the details of it, but invited me to come to a particular meeting where they wanted to discuss how to bring revival into New England. And I was sitting there listening, not saying anything, and suddenly I felt God wanted me to speak. And I began to speak to them. I said, I'm hearing God say, He wants us to go back to our local communities, reach out to other pastors who love Him and believe in Him, come together, form small groups, get to know each other, learn how to trust each other, pray together with each other, for each other, and for our communities. He has told me He will bless that. And then I was driving home from that meeting, and I said to myself, you opened your mouth and put your big fat foot in it. What are you going to do about that? Because I wasn't doing that sort of thing. And I did. I reached out to some pastors very close to me, sent a letter, and then called them and simply said, if you're dissatisfied with the quality of your relationship with Jesus Christ and with the work of the Holy Spirit in your life and in your pastorate, let's get together for lunch and talk about it. And 5 guys, I was one of them, got together, very diverse backgrounds at that time. One strong charismatic, one Foursquare guy from California, one who was a hippie originally and won to Christ through the Jesus movement on the West Coast in the 60s, pastoring a little congregation that came out of that, a United Methodist pastor, and myself.
You had the whole gamut there of evangelicalism.
That's right. But you see, the interesting thing was, all their churches were within 10 minutes of mine. I didn't even know 2 of those guys, only heard about them. And we agreed for 9 months to meet together every 3rd Thursday morning from 6:30 to 8:30 in the morning, because we had to know, what did God want to do?
You really wanted to get together at 6:30 in the morning.
You better believe it. And in the wintertime, we sat in the choir loft of the United Methodist Church with our coats and our gloves on, seriously. But we agreed that even when we were on vacation, if we were home, we would be there. And we also agreed none of us would walk, no matter how difficult it became, no matter how challenging. We had to know, was God in this? And if so, how was He? Within 2 or 3 meetings, the barriers began to come down, and we began to openly share. And every one of us at one time or another literally broke down in tears over the inner struggles we were having as pastors, the issues we were grappling with in our churches, and in 2 cases in the families as well. We didn't try to advise one another. We listened. We counseled where we felt it was good to counsel, and we prayed for each other.
That's wonderful. What a wonderful story. Let's pick up on that. Let's take a minute break, and we'll be back shortly and continue our interview with Dick Germaine and Dana Baker.